Hello everybody and welcome to the Saturday edition of the Seawolves. Sorry for posting a little bit later today, but I think actually most of the Saturdays I will post a bit later. This is obviously the first time that I'm making a bigger program for the Saturday, and the ambition is to really make it a cool show for you guys. My idea was with Seawolves to do something that's really separate from the Vendee. So the Vendee is going on right now, and the fact that you guys are liking my commentary on it is great. So I'll definitely keep going with that. And also in this show we're going to talk about the Vendee a lot, but in the future I also want to talk a lot about many non-Vendee Globe related sailing things, so also be ready for that. I got a lot of questions. I can show you guys behind me on the screen, like I copied and pasted all of the ones that I thought were really interesting, and it's about, I don't know, 20 pages or something of questions and comments that I think are really interesting to talk about. So I'm definitely not going to be able to get to all of them, but I made a bit of a selection, and we're definitely going to talk about a fair few, all of them basically having to do with this race. I also think it will be very interesting to include some stuff for beginners, because I always assume that the people watching this channel, and that's also something I see in the comments, some of you are sailors and may be very experienced, but some of you may also have never sailed before in your life and you just became interested because of the race. I'm seeing a lot of questions in the comments about simple things like reefing and stuff like that that you guys are interested in. So I'm not going to put that in the beginning of the show, because lots of you maybe already know that and it won't be so interesting for you. But every Saturday at the back end of the show, I'm going to talk about some basic principles in sailing, and I'm also going to compile them into a series so that we actually have something on the channel that will teach you all the basics that you need to know to start sailing yourself. So if that's something you're interested in, that's something to look forward to, I guess. And today I will also do that. So one of the questions that I got was, how do people actually gibe or tack an Imoca, because they're very highly technical boat, and a lot of you apparently are interested in that. I saw a lot of likes on that question also, so I will talk about that. But first we're going to begin with a quick overview of where the race is today, and then I want to go into a longer overview of the whole week and kind of look at what has happened in the race so far, the strategy, the tactics, who has done really well and who has done less well, and what seems to have been smart and what seems to have been not so smart, and all that stuff. And then we'll go into some more other technical cool things. So let's get started with the quick recap of today. Oh, I forgot something. Of course. Here we go. And some of you suggested that I should take a beer, which normally what I do on Saturday, but some people warn me that I might get in trouble with like a media commission and sponsors and all this stuff. So for now we're just doing coffee, and we'll see what happens later. Okay, let's continue. So looking at the leaderboard right now, we see that officially in the lead is Yes We Can from Jean Le Cam. He did it once again, put himself in first place. Really cool. But if we zoom in, of course, we do see that that's maybe not quite the right way to see the situation. So that's one question I also got from you in the comments, and that is, how do they decide who is leading the race? And there's a technical problem in this, which is, how do you tell who is first in a sailing race when there are many different courses to take? Sometimes in order to go forward, sailors have to actually track back. So what the organization, I guess, came up with, and this is more or less standard in big races like this, is that they use certain reference points to say whoever is closest to this particular geographical location is in the lead. So you can look at the whole race, and you can also see on the screen here that we have this kind of two wide lines that kind of represent the ideal course, the most efficient way, you know, around the race course. But we can also see here that literally the only 3 boats that are even in touch with the race course right now are Compagnie de Lead, we have Merci, we have Massive, and we have Vendee Global 1. And all the rest of the boats, and especially all of the boats in the front of the fleet, are more or less nowhere near the racetrack right now. And so the reason why Jean Le Cam right now is on the leaderboard as number 1 is because he's obviously at the head of the fleet. But compared to Hugo Boss, who's on number 2, he is closer to the racetrack. However, if we take into account the weather, then, and also looking at the prediction, of course, and the way that I looked at the weather yesterday, then we know that all the predictions so far are showing that a more westerly route down south will actually make for a bigger chance that they'll be able to pass through this kind of zone of very low amounts of wind, kind of a doldrum around, you know, the equator here, more on a westerly course, so that will actually be a faster route to take than the actual ideal route that the race organization has created. And so I think that the best thing to do is just to accept the classification as it is, because the alternative, if you don't take a full racing route to kind of measure everything against, then what are you going to do? Are we going to decide every day based on the weather who's in the most favorable position? As we've already seen, sometimes what seems like the most favorable position really isn't. And so if the race organization had decided to create a more loose way to kind of judge who is number 1, then actually you open up a whole other can of worms, because then who makes the rules, who decides what weather is the most favorable, and it would just not be a very good situation. So I actually think that the way the organization has done this is just, you know, it's not an ideal world, it's not an ideal way, but it's definitely better than all the other possible ways to do this. And so for those intents and purposes right now, Jean Le Cam with Yes We Can is in number 1, because he is closest to the most ideal route. And also he's, you know, he's very close to the same latitude as Hugo Boss, so they're definitely both ahead in the race. They're definitely both having good breeze and, you know, creating quite some distance now between the two of them and the rest of the pack. So yeah, all we can say is head off to both of the gentlemen, and tactically, of course, we might say that maybe Alex is actually in a better position right now. But on the other hand, he's further away from the racetrack. He's going to have to get back to the racetrack at some point, so he is going to have to make more distance. Now obviously his boat is also quite a bit faster, or at least capable of higher speeds than Jean Le Cam's boat. So, you know, we'll see how it works out. But that at least answers one of your questions, which is how did they measure who is first in this leaderboard. So if we look at the places of the fleet right now, you can kind of see the location of Storm Theta there, and I also marked that location on the map more or less here. And if we look at the development of the weather, we can quite clearly see why both Jean Le Cam and Hugo Boss are choosing this more southerly route, like I talked about yesterday. So if we actually run the prediction from now till the start of Sunday, and then we see that obviously the wind is moving west with this real bridge, this real connection between the system they're in right now and the actual trade winds down here below, that's going to happen more to the south, while this area more to the east of them is just opening up more and more. I'll show you again from, you know, the moment now. Already to the east of them, giant area with not so much wind. And that's basically going to stay that way, as you can see, with just a large hole to the east of them, and the way to cross that generally moving more and more to the south and more to the west. So southwest right now is just the best course to take, and so that explains why they are driving this way right now. And my guess is that they will keep following this system until they actually connect with the, you know, the larger winds down below, and that's when they will obviously be able to change their course, as the wind down here is also much more favorable to that. and then we'll see what challenges next week will bring. But if they can just get over this little weather bridge, let's call it, then they'll at least have probably 2-3 more days of just excellent champagne sailing, almost in nice weather, warm weather with lots of wind, a steady 20 to 25 knots breeze, which will be perfect both for the foiling boats and for the non-foiling boats. And we'll see some really beautiful, fast sailing, some of it probably in excellent weather, and at night maybe some thunderstorms and things like that. But that's where they're all trying to get right now, and that's hopefully what they'll be able to achieve. And yeah, also, as I predicted, we do see the field kind of falling apart now, as some of the boats are only just coming out of Theta. And yeah, it will be very interesting to see if all of them are able to cross that giant low wind zone that is developing, or that some of the boats actually will get stuck in there, and it might be looking at extra days of time getting through that zone, because it's not just a zone without a lot of wind, it's a very, very big zone without any wind. And so once you're really stuck in an area like that, it can take a long time, sometimes days, sometimes even like a week before wind returns. So let's hope that nobody gets stuck in there, but I think probably some of them maybe will. So I guess we'll see what happens. Now, another thing that many of you asked for is some more information on Jean Le Cam, because who is this mysterious Frenchman that seems to be driving a non-foiling boat all the way to the front of the pack consistently every time? Who is this man? Where did he come from? And how is he constantly, putting Hugo Boss, right there with him? So I thought it would be cool to do a little bit of a info dive on Jean. And yeah, I think that one of the things that really stands out, of course, is his skill at navigation. And that's not so mysterious if you realize that the biggest battle feats of this man is that he won actually the Figaro 3 times in a row, and also participated in, I think, 3 transats, the French transat, the Transat d'Ajax, and also that this is his 4th time now doing the Vendee Globe, which he almost won already once, became 2nd, and I think 5th also one earlier time. And the main thing to really realize is that French ocean sailors are some of the best ocean sailors because they're living in the Bay of Biscay, which is just one of the toughest offshore environments there is. To give you an idea of how tough the Bay of Biscay is, I live in Holland, so 2 countries up from France. And whenever we want to cross the Bay of Biscay to Spain, which is something that a lot of cruisers do in the summer, there's actually a period, which is right now, basically between mid-September until the end of January, mid-February, when most boat insurance companies actually will not insure pleasure yachts to go across the Bay of Biscay, because the risk of storms there is so high, and it's considered such a dangerous place, because you can have giant swells there, and basically all of the bad weather from the Atlantic, if it's there, ends up running into the Bay of Biscay. And so it's a really, really tough offshore environment. And so that's why the French are, of course, renowned for their amazing offshore sailing, and why this Imoca class and the whole technology contest around there is really also a French contest. It's a French achievement. They've been working on these boats, researching all this for a long, long time, and they are absolutely at the forefront of all of these developments. And so both the Figaro, because I was talking about Jean Le Cam, and the Transat are huge races in France that really drive technology, but it also really focus on driving excellent seamanship. So the Figaro, and I think the Transat also, are races. One is around the Fastnet Rock from France and back, and the other one is, of course, again, across the Atlantic. but both do not allow digital plotters. So the captains have to plot everything by hand. They have a compass. I think they're allowed a GPS, but that's it. And the rest they have to, and they have, I think, weather updates, for safety. But other than that, they have to do everything with their minds. All of the navigation with no plotter device or anything on board, like what the boats in the Vendee Globe do have, because the Vendee Globe is, fully into technology. They can use most of the modern prediction models and computers for setting their courses based on the optimal figures for their boat. This is really a lot of high-tech planning and setting courses, while in both the Figaro and the Transat, that is not the case. And so somebody like Jean Le Cam, who won the Figaro 3 times. Now that is not to be understated. That's a massive, massive feat. Some of the best people competing there. And for him to win a contest like that 3 times in a row, and doing similarly extremely well in the Transat and in earlier Vendee Globes, it just goes to show that this man is absolutely excellent at navigating without a computer, without all these modern systems, if he has to. So put on top of that some of all the stuff that the modern navigational software and mathematical models around boat speed and all these different things can produce, and then it really becomes more apparent why, even despite the fact that he is sailing an older boat without foils, he's able to make the best of these conditions, and deserves his place at the forefront of the fleet. And so some of you have also asked me, like, why, how is it that he's able to do this? Well, there are 2 steps, I guess. First of all is just setting his course and knowing what's important. And from the beginning in this race, we see that he's constantly sacrificed, a first position in the overall fleet, in the pack, in the boats, that generally kind of tend to stay a little bit together and do the same thing. He's constantly picked different courses. He's constantly picked a more southerly route, even if it meant that he would be maybe a little bit more slower, and be kind of at the back of the pack where he, started. Because at first the whole pack was moving a bit more on a reach and just going west really fast. He was the only boat that from the beginning was choosing a more southerly route. And he's constantly been doing that, opting not maybe to be the fastest in the moment, but to take the shortest route, to stay close to the racetrack, and to sometimes beat into the wind more extremely, making it more uncomfortable for him, but really maximizing his upwind movement. And it's paid off, and eventually he slowly but certainly worked his way to the front of the pack. And so that's basically the strategy that is used, and I think he's been absolutely excellent at it, waiting for the right moment and then going for it. Similarly, Alex has done the same thing. If you studied his race so far, you can see that he's also done things differently. When you look at his position within the foiling fleet more, he's also constantly been a little bit slower, but a little bit more towards the southern position. And he's generally been very much holding back. Now I'll get into that a little bit later, but compare the 2, they more or less have sailed a similar strategy. More on the conservative side, more focused on getting south than getting west. And so far for both of them, it has really paid off. And their tracks are a bit different, but the boats are different. So Jean just has more upwind ability with his boat. The non-foiling boats are better at just dead upwind beating than the foilers, because this giant foils into the straight into the waves also brings some resistance with it, so they're just not that fast upwind. And it's also a bit more dangerous to constantly slam those wings straight into the waves, because that just increases the chances for breaking stuff. And so it's natural that all the foilers have to be a little bit more careful with beating straight into the wind, while Jean can basically knock his boat into the wind as hard as he wants to. And it's built to take that. Then last point about Jean, his boat. So yes, we can is actually the 2008-2009 winning boat of the Vendee Globe of that year. So it's not just any slightly older boat. No, this is a previous Vendee Globe winner he's racing that was significantly updated. So they changed the shape a little bit to make it a little bit faster, and it also has pretty much all of the modern gear on board except for foils. So it does have a wing mast, it does have the spreaders and everything. So an older model boat, not all the way up to spec, but definitely not a boat without its technological marvels still. And I think it's super cool to see that he's, you know, for my mind, absolutely earned the first place where he's at right now. And yeah, it's definitely possible that his route ends up being better than Alex's, and he's able to tack again sooner and keep his lead for now. We will see what happens. Also possible that Hugo jumps at the bit and starts getting faster and faster, and will really put some distance between him and basically all the rest of the fleet. Because if he manages to really put some distance between him and Jean Le Cam to the south, then Hugo is basically going to be out there on its own, quite far ahead of the fleet now. So we'll see what happens, I guess. Now for the recap of week one. I would say that so far this has been a very, very successful race and a successful start with actually very few casualties, because it may seem like there's a lot of boats breaking and experiencing problems, but actually for the start it's really not that bad. I mean, we had one boat that fell out basically right after the start. We have Charal now really broken going back, but those are really the only two, and all the rest of the boats, Lucky 10 of course had a problem but was able to solve it and is now back in the race. So we have a grand total of 2 boats that experienced real problems. And I would say that actually, I guess it was Artet Finetre who, you know, had the problem at the start. So that was something that they just couldn't anticipate. It's really only been Charal that's had a total failure, let's say, and really had to return to port. He's in Le Sable right now, and I guess he still has 4 days to see if they can make it back onto the water. And I do think that strategically you might conclude that Jeremy took too much risk, right? Because we see all of the foilers basically holding back. It's something you hear everybody about Alex Thombson, like, why is he not going so fast? Why is he not constantly leading from the start? Why is he maybe not pushing the boat so much? Well, in essence, because he doesn't want to break the boat in exactly the way that what happened to Jeremy. Now, obviously Jeremy didn't choose to do that, but we did see that from the very start, Jeremy has been pushing his boat to the absolute maximum. I mean, 5 minutes from the start, he was ahead with the biggest sail plan, most risky sail plan he could take at that time, while Hugo was flying much smaller sails, not really caring about being first in that period of the race. And throughout the first 3 days, we saw the same thing. The foiling fleet went forward, went more west, tried to find a lot of speed, and we saw Jeremy right at the front of it all the time. They tacked, went south. Right away, we saw him pushing the boat, probably to its maximum right away, fighting himself back into the lead and holding on to the lead for quite a while. Then, with Hugo Boss kind of, you know, slowly meandering through the fleet, sometimes a bit more ahead, sometimes a bit more behind, but constantly being quite conservative, waiting for the right moments to pick off leads again, resulting in Alex being in one piece and being in the lead, while Charal and Jeremy really have taken a different strategy. His strategy has been to just, you know, put the hammer down all the way right from the start. And I don't think that it's necessarily a coincidence, or in that sense bad luck, that he's had you know, a major damage to the boat this soon in the race, because this soon in the race is the most dangerous place to go really fast. And that's why we saw Alex, but also many of the other foilers, taken a much more conservative approach, not pushing the boats all the way to the maximum, maybe not caring so much about being first all the time in this phase of the race, but just being content with being in the leading pack and you know, being a little bit more careful, because being careful in the end is a major factor in this race. The racetrack is 40,000 plus miles long, and if you break the boat, you can't finish, you can't win. And so I obviously really hope that Jeremy is able to, you know, regain a full function and that he's able to enter the race again, because his boat is spectacular. I love the way how he sails, and I think it's really cool to have somebody in there who is just full on all the time and just, you know, races the race. Because that is something that also belongs in there, but it is a different strategy. And yeah, I don't think that his earlier damage can be put down purely to luck. He definitely had a strategy, and this is one of the possible outcomes of that strategy, I guess, also. So we'll see how he will sail if he gets back in the race and if something changes, I guess. But I think the contrast between the Hugo Boss and Charal in this sense is kind of interesting, right? To have one boat going full out all the way while having Alex be at the front now, but everybody agrees that he's been very, very conservative, because I think we all know that this beast of him is able to do probably 40 knots or even more, and I don't think we've seen him go over 22 knots, even though there probably have been some situations where if he really wanted to, he probably could have put up some more sail area or reefed a bit later, and he could have put the boats into this kind of speed. So I guess we'll see what happens, but that's my analysis of you know, between those two guys at the front. Then of course I'm also following initiatives Kerr with Sam Davies and Pip Hare. Those are the three that we're really going to keep looking at this channel, because they represent kind of the three classes. So the super foilers, the adapted previous generation boats, and a real older previous generation boat. And yeah, it's very, very cool to see that Initiatives Kerr is actually very well maintained her place at you know, the front, the vanguard of the fleet, let's say. Officially right now she's in 9th place. But you know, looking again at the real weather situation, I would say that she's probably 5th or 6th based on you know, what you think the ideal racetrack is comparing to the wind right now, which for her I think is an absolutely excellent result. Basically she has Apivia, PRB linked out, and Hugo Boss and Jean Le Cam right in front of her, and the rest is a lot more to the east and in less favorable positions than she is. So we'll see how she does, but so far I think absolutely excellent job. And then of course we have Medallia with Pip Hare, who right now is in 24th place, really close to the racetrack, and is actually only just making her way into the TEDA system, which has weakened quite a bit by now. But I think so far she's done an amazing race. 24th with her boat is great. I mean, like I said, she is, I think, the oldest boat in the fleet with the least frills and special gear on board. She has one dagger board, and it, I think, is the only dagger board that has actually a manual winching inside, so she doesn't even have a hydraulic ram to position it. So I'm super impressed. It seems that she is kind of team racing together with One Planet, One Ocean, Didac Costa right now, and I guess we'll see which of the two makes it through the storm in the lead, but it's really cool to see that she's doing so well. Then on a different level, so we do really see that both the foiling boats and the non-foiling boats are still pretty much an even match because of the very unusual and tricky weather situations. It's just pretty much negated the downwind advantage that the foiling boats have. So one question that I got in the comments also is, what is kind of the right situation for the foiling boats to really maximize their potential? Well, 20 to 25 knots of wind is generally ideal for any sailing boat, because you can just set your sails to have exactly the amount of power that you want. And that's generally different for every boat. But with 20 to 25 knots, you can basically set your boat speed yourself. Then for the foilers, a flatter sea generally is better because they'll bounce around less and the foils will be more steady in the water. And they should be able to make a boat speed of over 13 or 14 knots. So I explained this also in one of my earlier videos. But the foils really start working when they get a boat speed of 13 to 14 knots. So as soon as they hit that mark, the foils really start flying and they get more or less an instant boost of 4 to 6 knots of extra boat speed, depending on which boat you're talking about and which foil, because all the boats are different. So the exact boost they get is different for every boat. But if a foiling boat manages to go 13 or 14 knots, they will instantly just start flying and they'll instantly get this 5 or 6 knot of bonus speed basically. So that's ideal for them. And yeah, if they have 20 to 25 knot winds in relatively flat seas, that's more or less the ideal conditions for them to really fly. And as far as points of sail, so wind direction, as I understand it, the boats do best on a slightly downwind, so a bit of reaching condition seems to be ideal for the foilers as far as I understand it. So I hope I also answered that. And that brings us to your questions. So I put some of them up here on the screen. I'll go through them as fast but also as good as I can. And the first one is maybe a question for tomorrow by Jan Dodd. Has Alex and the other foilers been able to use their foils to maximum effect yet? What conditions do they need, wind, sea state, etc., to really get up and start flying? Well, I guess I already just answered that question. The next one is, what is your opinion about the trend on the Imoca class design converting into lighter, possibly more fragile hull design? Well, actually, I don't think that that's true. They are getting lighter, but as far as I understand, they actually toughened up the boats quite a bit by including more internal structure. So they're taking off a lot of stuff on the outside, but they're actually adding quite a bit of stuff on the inside to make them more structurally sound, especially the bottom of the hull, because they can slam so hard. They've, as I understand it, improved some of the structural strength quite a bit, and that goes for the foils also. So as I explained in an earlier video, most of them have got bigger, thicker also, so essentially stronger. And I think that also explains why we've seen actually less breakages this year, why we do see some damage, but no foils have broken yet. So yeah, so far actually I think that yes, the boats are getting a bit lighter, but they're actually not really getting more fragile. They're actually getting stronger so far. So that's my answer to that. Next one, can you talk about the different weather models? I'll make a separate video actually on that, but generally I use all the models. So I think it's a death trap to look at one particular model. Most models, if you look at Vendee, for example, which I have no affiliation with Vendee, by the way, I just like to use it. You see that they have different models, but all the models predict also in different time frames. So some may have actually a 2 or 3 day prediction, while others do 10 or even 12-day predictions. And generally the models that focus really on short term are more accurate, while the longer term models are less accurate but give a much larger range. It all depends on where you put the computing power, I guess. And all of them also use different inputs, they're different strategies mostly of looking at the weather. And yeah, I think the really good sailors basically look at all the models they can get their hands on and they see where the models disagree. And generally, if you can find 2 or 3 models that are agreeing on a certain situation, that gives it a high probability of maybe happening. Whilst if you find yourself in a situation where you have 2 or 3 models that all kind of disagree on what's going to happen, then basically there's really no way to tell. So that's my answer on that. But I will do a video on weather prediction and all of the technical aspects of that to really become better at that, and we'll make that into a separate thing at some point. Can you get more into detail about sale options and logistics of sale choices and changes? Yeah, I think that's something that we've seen in the race so far. So I mentioned the difference between the approaches of, say, Charal or even Initiatives Curve, for example, with Sam Davis, and, for example, Hugo Boss, where you saw both Charal and Initiatives Curve sail with kind of the maximum sail area from the start of the race, opting to really, try to put all the speed in that they possibly could right from the start. While we see several other boats, but Hugo Boss most notably, taking a much more conservative approach. There were a lot of comments and questions about when both Hugo and Jean Le Cam were entering Storm Theda, and they both cut it quite close to the center. But you could clearly see that Hugo Boss's boat speed was quite a bit lower than that of Jean Le Cam, and also quite a bit lower actually than some of the other foilers once they were kind of in the same location in the storm. And that shows me that Alex probably reefed a lot more than the other boats, meaning that he chose to just sail with a smaller sail area, foregoing maybe 2-3 knots of extra boat speed that he could have gotten, but just making sure that he was going to get his boat through this safely, and not really trying to push it for maximum boat speed all the way. Probably also has a lot to do with the waves. As I plotted his course yesterday, I could see that he was getting 4 to 5 meter waves. I couldn't see actually how far they were apart, but when you have big waves like that and the possibility of surfing and slamming a lot with the new boat, I don't know how much time he has spent in that particular sea state yet with this boat. It's known that he hasn't spent a lot of time using this boat in different big seas yet. So this might actually be one of the first times that he actually racing in this particular situations. So I think he's still just getting to know the boat, finding out more, and waiting to know a little bit more before really putting the hammer down. And so yeah, we see the more experienced sailors like Charal taking more risks there, putting up more sail area. And as I just mentioned before, that is also a risk, especially with this race being so long. And so we see several people sailing more conservatively than they strictly need to, but just playing it on the safe side, while others are more, pushing to be at the head of the fleet or even in first place right now by risking it with bigger sail choices. But yeah, that also brings the risk of trouble more to the forefront. Then we have Leona Puxley who's saying, thank you for the videos. I would be keen to learn more about the repairs the skippers are doing. In my limited yacht experience, there's always a list of repair jobs to do, even at the start of the race. So seeing them battered by the conditions, and then the repetitive strain that you explained, what is there that you are, what are they endlessly doing in the background? Well, if you looked through the daily videos that some of the sailors are posting, which are excellent by the way to watch, you will see that many of them are constantly working on their lines. So both their chutes and their tag lines and stuff, in a situation where you have big seas, big waves, the conditions that they are more or less constantly in, you will always have lines that chafe. So basically, having chutes or any lines that are rubbing against different parts of the boat as the ship is constantly moving through the waves. It's a constant job to keep looking out that whenever the position of the boat changes, if there are maybe new points where important lines may be chafing or where other equipment may be rubbing against something and potentially breaking. Because as I explained in the previous video, vibrations, shaking, this is just a constant thing that constantly needs attention. So I would say mostly lines, and other than that, it's really structural problems that might come up. So we've seen some damage to the hull with Charal, for example. We had Hugo Boss actually that had a problem with a fishing line earlier, 2 days ago I think. And so there are lots of minor things like that. Some of the boats may also sometimes have to deal with some seaweed or other small things, getting stuck on the boat that they have to get rid of, or small damages in sails. I think that Pip Hare actually had a bit of a chafe problem.
I noticed after the front went through that couple of the elastic tiebacks on the second set of spreaders had broken. So I've decided now is probably the best chance I'm going to have to go up the mast and fix them.
And and we have of course 3 sailors who had problems with their sail hooks. So I think especially the J2 hook was a problem. I guess maybe they're all running the same system, and a supplier maybe did something that didn't work. I don't know the details. I don't know who was at fault there or what was the problem. But yeah, it's mostly active sailing problems that they're dealing with. So stuff that has to do with the sails that are up right now, with the lines that they're using right now that for whatever reason are starting to get damaged or starting to get chafe, and just constantly having to move everything around and keep everything in good condition. But major structural things, in generally not so much. They're really just solving the problems of today. And also don't forget that so far they've been very actively sailing, constantly having to trim. They haven't had a situation with 2-3 hours of the same wind yet. So most of them are very sleep deprived, and most of them have to constantly change things, do sail changes and stuff. So the upkeep is also mostly just setting up the boat right for the conditions, the wind conditions that they are in right now. And then I have Francisco Maltoni, who asked, really great show, are there models which consider the confidence intervals, and so proposably not only the best route but also a route which could be good if some deviations from the forecast are considered? So basically, are weather models also taking into account various different scenarios? And the answer to that is yes and no. So if you use a service like Predict Wind, for example, which I was using in the show yesterday, that will generate actually 4 or more different courses based on the different weather prediction models that the program has. And so those are different weather forecasts. It's basically taking 4 completely different forecasts and saying, well, if this weather scenario happened, this would be the ideal route. But if this weather scenario happened, this other route might be better. And it's giving you actually 4 different options based on 4 different weather models. So that's actually a real thing that actually happens. And all the sailors, I think, have access to models like that. So they generally will have 2 to 4 models that they can choose from, saying, well, the probability of this weather happening means I should take this course, but this other model is pretty strong that suggests a slightly different course, and they kind of have to make their choice to take an average of the 2 or to go for 1 or more of the different strategies specifically. Are the doldrums normally much lower to the equator? Yes. So weather changes, climate changes, and right now, for whatever reason, it seems that they've moved south a little bit. So yeah, we'll see when they will get there. Is there a final ranking handicap system will be applied? Because some of the boats are different, and the answer to that is no. So Imoca is one class with a lot of freedom within the class, but there is no final points to be deducted if you do have foils or anything like that. The boats are considered equal. Everybody has their chance to upgrade the boat within the rules to the specifications that they want, and that's it. So there are no subclasses or anything like that for the overall race. Of course, we are talking about non-foiling boats and foiling boats, so in the public mind there's definitely a difference, and I'm sure that eventually we'll talk about the non-foiling winner and the overall winner and this type of things, but it's not the official winner. The official winner is just the winner in the market class, which includes all of the boats that are participating in the race. Does the routing software also provide sufficient information to plan sleep tactically? Yes, I guess so. So if the sailors see that there will be a consistent area of consistent wind and wave action that creates a nice stable platform, and where they, because of their predictions, estimate that they won't have to do much sail changes or anything like that for a while, and they can see that coming, then sure, they can plan to set up the boat at a certain point and say, well, those 2 hours I probably will get some more sleep. But generally they won't sleep more than 20 minutes or half an hour at a time. So if they want to sleep more and they have steady conditions, they will maybe sleep for 20 minutes or an hour, then they will wake up, make sure everything is okay, check the weather again, and then they might sleep for another hour. But they're never ever going to be sleeping for an hour or 2 hours or even 3 hours at a time generally. At some wind velocity, the boats are at maximum safe speed, right? From Frank Persons. When do you start avoiding the high winds? Reefing down at 15, avoid winds over 25 as long as the path's still okay. Yeah, so there isn't really a maximum safe speed, and especially later in the race, I think that most of the racers will estimate the maximum safe speed a lot higher than they're estimating it right now in the beginning. So there isn't really such a thing as like a maximum safe speed. If you only have like 2 miles to go and you're going downwind and you're racing the competition right behind you, then the maximum safe speed is as fast as you can possibly get the boat to go. So no, I don't really think that exists, but there is the safety aspect and the survival aspect to the race, and so that's a strategic decision at every moment during the race. It's a battle between going really fast and keeping the boat in one piece, and that's never going to go away, so that's always a factor. Explain to me why Alex Thombson is losing to Yes You Can. Well, he's not, so they're basically sailing more or less an even race right now, and they have very different boats, but tactically they're doing more or less equally good. They're in an almost equal position right now. And the truth is that the weather so far just negates any technical advantage of the foils that Hugo Boss has right now. And actually, tactically, the weather has really favored the non-foiling boats so far, and that's why Jean Le Cam is ahead. But when the weather turns and the weather becomes more favorable to the foiling boats, you know, at some point, if the boat speeds are going to hit over 30 knots, that's something that that Jean Le Cam's boat is simply not capable probably of hitting those type of speeds. And at that point, the technical advantage of having the foils will just, you know, overpower the non-foiling boats. And you know, once we get into the Southern Ocean, we're very likely going to see that happening. Oh yeah, some info on what's happening to Charal right now. So Charal is in Les Sables d'Olonne getting fixed right now, and basically they have till the 18th. So the starting line is open to the 18th, which means that they have 4 days to get the boat over the finish line again. And no one really knows exactly the full extent of the damage. So yeah, here's to hoping that they're able to fix it and get the boat back into the race. But yeah, no one knows for sure what's going to happen. Then, technical question, where the heck are those boats getting the electricity for all those sensors, pumps, cameras, autopilots, monitors, etc.? From Ilya Petriuk. Good question. Most of them have either a hydro, they have a propeller, 1 or 2 in the back of the boat in the water that's constantly generating power from there. They're using solar, so Hugo Boss, for example, is fully solar powered, and some of them have wind generations. And at the speed that they're sailing, they're basically, you know, generating a lot of power all the time. And yeah, if they balance the boats right, they actually shouldn't be using so much power. You know, most of the time they're running pretty efficiently, let's say, all of these boats. So yeah, they're getting it from hydropower, from wind power, or from solar power. And that brings us to the question that I told you about earlier, which is how do they actually jibe or tack these Imocas? Because they're very, very complicated boats, right? So I had to actually look into this also, and the answer is that there's not really one answer, because all of the boats are different, and so some of the boats have 1 dagger board, others have 2 dagger boards, the other boats have foils, of course, but all of the foils are kind of different. You know, Pip Hare once says, well, the only thing really that's the same about my boat and a boat like Charal is that it's 16 meters long, and that's pretty much the only thing that they have in common. And so I don't even know if it's like 16 meters actually exactly, but the point is they're the same length, and that's pretty much the only thing that they have in common. And other than that, they're just almost completely different boats. They sail different, they work different, so there isn't one answer to it. But I did you know, look up kind of what the steps are, and basically when they're under sail, they generally will have to, like some boats use water ballast, others not, but they generally tacking or jibing the boat, so actually changing the position of the boat, is the last thing they will do. So, you know, once the boat is underway and in its position, they'll have all the ballast on the right side. They'll have the keel set to the right position if it's a boat that has the movable keel, and they'll have all of their sails and other ballast, you know, loaded on the sort of the high side of the boat to keep the boat as flat as possible. Though with some of the foiling boats, it's also very much the foil now that's keeping them from, you know, heeling over too much. That kind of keeps them steady also. So on foiling boats, it might be a little bit different also. But generally, what they will do is they will move part of the ballast over, sometimes all of it, sometimes part of it, depends a little bit on the boat. Set the running back stays or other stays that have to kind of be prepared for the for the jibe or the tack. Then they will, if they have a movable keel, move the keel over to the other side.
Now on Medallia, we cant the keel, I cant the keel, using a really simple system of ropes, block and tackle, and then I have an electric winch behind that box there. Obviously using ropes and block and tackle and electric winch, I don't have the power that a hydraulic ram has, which means that I need a much longer head on the keel to get a bigger lever so that I've got the power to move the keel from side to side.
And at that point, the boat will be very disbalanced. So at that point, they'll be heeling over very much to the wrong side, let's say. And at that point, they have really quite a short window to switch over the boat because basically everything will be on the wrong side. So they first have to move more or less all of the setup to the other side, then jibe or tack the boat, and then, you know, set everything up again quickly and smoothly. But it really depends from boat to boat what the different things are that they're setting. But for a dagger boat, for example, the order, I actually wrote it down, is that they first reset the dagger board, then adjust the stays, the back stays, then they reset the ballast, then they actually do over the keel, and then they should switch over the sail and reset everything. So that's basically the order they do it in. And you know, like with any tack or jibe, if you're jibing, of course they're going to first bring in the sails towards the center of the boat as much as possible, then have a short you know, move through the center of the wind. Whether you're tacking or jibing doesn't mean you always want to keep that moment as short as possible, and then letting out the sails, resetting everything optimally, and maybe, you know, adjusting ballast or filling up the ballast more if they did so partially. But again, that's different from boat to boat. So there really isn't one way to do it, and these boats are very, very technical. They have lots of different systems and lines to very precisely set everything. So yeah, I heard from one of the foiling boats that a really good tack fully from beginning to end takes about 45 minutes. So you know, imagine. So that means that basically they're probably taking 20 to 25 minutes to move all the ballast over, move all the stuff over, reset the stays, etc., loosen everything, then tacking over the boat, and then taking another 20 minutes or so to reset everything, tighten everything optimally, and make sure that the boat is once again you know, at optimal speed moving on the new tack. So that's generally how to tack or jibe an Imoca. So I said that at the beginning of the video that I would put some beginner sailing tips at the end, but actually I'm already running so late with this video and with the editing that I'm going to skip that for today and actually move it to the video tomorrow. And for next week's longer Saturday show, I'll be able to plan a bit more and actually start already some things during the week. So we'll definitely put it in that video then. But for now, look forward to that for tomorrow. So that was it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this longer, a bit more technical update. And you know, please like, share, support the channel, of course. Go to the website seawolvestv.com. Next week, you'll see the appearance of some new microphones and other stuff, and we'll get into some very interesting other technical upgrades for the vlog. So look forward to that. Thank you to all the backers who joined this week. It's really amazing. I've gotten, I think, like 100 emails from people with different tips and support and stuff. So absolutely great, guys. Keep it coming. I'm really loving it. And see you all tomorrow.